If you're setting up your amp in the room, disable all of your pedals and get a good amp sound early on. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm gonna be showing you how to dial in some settings for recording electric guitar at home. Now, this is not just gonna apply for the digital recording world. If you do have a guitar amp and you got a microphone in front of it, there's some concepts in this video that I think you'll find helpful as well, because when it comes to recording or making your guitar tone, there's a yin and yang aspect of input and output. And I want to take this video on a very beginner friendly level. So all you need to get up and running is, of course, an electric guitar of whatever sort. I've got my Fender Stratocaster here. It's got 5 different pickup positions I can make use of. I love using it for recording. But if you have a Telecaster or some sort of semi-hollow, whatever guitar you're using should be just fine. But one of the things I want to mention, and I get this in the comment section a lot, is that when you're recording guitars, specifically into an audio interface, or you're getting into recording for the first time, you're gonna realize that your instrument is a lot more noisy than what you may think it is. So if you play live at a gig, or if you're playing at church, you may go unnoticed with the sound. So the noise level of your amp, the noise level of your guitar, if you're on a stage and there's a bunch of other musicians playing, you can convince yourself that you have a very clean signal, but then when you get into the recording world, it's very noisy. So some of the things I want to recommend that you do is, number one, if you're really bothered by noise, you probably want to stay away from single coil pickups, okay? There are certain positions, 1, 3, and 5 on a Stratocaster that are just going to have a certain level of hum, and that's completely normal. It shouldn't necessarily be avoided, but there is such thing as too much hum. So if that really bothers you, you can stay in pickup positions 2 and 4 on the Stratocaster. This will make use of the neck in the middle pickup, or it'll make use of the bridge in the middle pickup, and it doesn't have as much hum. If you're still getting hum with humbuckers or these 2 positions on the Strat, you probably have some grounding issues, and that can come down to so many different aspects. Here on my channel, I've got a video where I specifically went through on my bass guitar and put copper foil all inside the cavity. So copper foil, if you want to get some on Amazon, it's basically like a roll of tape, but it's all copper, and it will provide some extra shielding for your instrument. If you have a low or poor quality wiring setup in your guitar, copper foil is a good thing to try at first. It's not very expensive. You can simply put some in the inside of your cavity, see if it works. If it works, you'll get rid of that hum. And like I said, I got a video on that on my channel as well. But if you're having excessive noise issues, it's also gonna come down to how you set up your pedals and how you set up your amp, which is the whole purpose of today's video. So these concepts, whether you're using a real amp or you're using the software plug-in versions of amp simulators, you're still gonna have to wrestle with the yin and yang of levels, okay? So, provided that your guitar is of quality, that you don't have any wiring issues going on, you have a solid guitar cable. Again, if you're having issues with your guitar, swap out the guitar cable. Might be just the cable's fault. And then also the minimal amount of pedals, okay? Today's video, I'm just gonna be running straight into my Apollo Twin audio interface. In between, I do have my Peterson floor tuner. I highly recommend you use a tuner in real life. Sometimes the software tuners are great. Sometimes they're not super accurate, or they're not as helpful as they could be. So basically, from my electric guitar, I'm going straight from the output jack. I'm going from the output jack into my Peterson tuner, which is on the floor, which I can easily reach over, check my tuning as needed. And you'll see me do that throughout the video. Outside of my tuner, I'm going from my tuner pedal straight into my audio interface. So if you're into recording, if you're setting up a home studio, you probably need some sort of audio interface. These can come in the affordable range, like the Focusrite Scarlett. It has 2 channels on the front. You'll need to look for the jack that's specifically labeled for guitars, and that's for a purpose, okay? Just because it fits the same connector doesn't mean that it's specifically made for guitars. So make sure you're going into the high Z input of whatever audio interface you're using. The universal audio interfaces on the front of their Apollo interfaces, you can clearly see a picture of a guitar and it has a 1/4 inch input. I'm going into the high Z input. It definitely makes a difference on the quality of your recording. So make sure you're going into the guitar input of your audio interface. Okay, so next here on the screen, I've got UAD Console. This is the software that comes with my audio interface. Your audio interface may not come with software, or it may have something that looks a little different. Again, this video, I'm just going through the basics of setting up the levels. So with your electric guitar plugged in, you should be seeing some sort of signal on the input. On the front of the Focusrite Scarlett, they have a nifty little LED that will turn green whenever you're getting a good signal, and it will turn red if you're clipping. So the first thing I want to say is that no matter what your process looks like, if you're plugged into a bunch of pedals, the first thing you should probably do is bypass all of your pedals. Turn off all of your effects, all of your reverbs, all of your distortion pedals, even your amp simulation pedal, and just have it as if your guitar is being plugged straight into your audio interface, okay? We'll talk about amps in just a second, but your level going into your audio interface needs to be pretty consistent. It needs to have a healthy signal. And the way that we adjust that is, of course, with the gain knob. So here I have a gain knob on my audio interface, and if I turn it down all the way, you'll see on the screen, I am getting a green signal that's hitting roughly, when I really dig into like a G chord, I'm hitting a little bit between -20 and -30, it looks like, okay? I need this to be a lot more healthy. So I'm gonna adjust the gain. I'm gonna turn up the gain knob so that as I strum a heavy A major chord or such, if I really dig in, I'm gonna be much closer to 0, okay? Now on UAD, they have a lot of things built in where you can go above 0, and that's not necessarily clipping. So what I'll do is I'll go into PreSonus Studio One, which is my digital audio workstation. You may be running Pro Tools, Logic, or GarageBand. Wherever your audio interface is going into record music from, you want to double check your levels. And on the input, like PreSonus Studio One, you can open up the mix tab, and then here there's a section that you can enable with an arrow, and it basically shows you your input metering. So here on Apollo 1, I've got a nice healthy signal that if I'm strumming G chords and such, I'm gonna be getting between -12 and -24 pretty consistently. Now, you'll hear me say this a lot in the video, that with the yin and yang, you need to have what's called your heaviest or your 100%. So if I go to an A basic and A major chord right here, and I've got a pick in hand, with my volume all the way at 100 and my tone knobs all the way at 100, I am on the fourth position, where basically I'm taking my middle and my neck pickup. If I strum aggressively hard, probably the hardest I'll ever strum, at most I'm hitting -12, and that is gonna be a sweet spot, even without me hearing what's going on in software world. Now let me grab my headphones. Again, I wanna be clear, my guitar settings, this is my preference. I just wanna have my volume knob at 100% and my tone knobs at 100% as well. I do that because there are so many variables involved. If I get too finicky with these knobs on the guitar, I can easily lose my settings, and then if I come back to record and my daughter's been in the room, she might have messed with the tone knobs on my guitars. I don't wanna sit and have to remember, okay, this knob was on 6 and my volume knob was on 8. I just keep everything at 100 when I'm recording, so that way I can recall my settings and know that everything's where it's supposed to be. Okay, so this is the sound of my electric guitar going straight into the audio interface. No pedals, no amp simulation whatsoever, but it's a nice, healthy signal for recording. If I lighten up, lots of dynamics. Going forward, I know that every time I add a distortion plugin, every time I add some sort of amp simulator, that dynamic range is gonna get less and less. If you start the recording process and your dynamic range is completely gone, you are not gonna have as much headroom as you're gonna want to have going forward, okay? Because pretty much everything else that we're gonna be talking about is gonna come down to taste and how much you want. But the initial levels of your recording, you need to have something at least between the -18 and -12 on your metering. So now we're in PreSonus Studio One. It does not matter what digital audio workstation you're using. It can be Pro Tools, GarageBand. They all have some great stuff to them. PreSonus Studio One has on their professional version, you have full access to what they call Ampire. Ampire is a guitar amp pedal simulator. I'm using it in this video because it's very much available to you PreSonus Studio One users. I also have the software copy of the Helix plugin, which I highly recommend if you're a serious, quote unquote, serious guitar player that does a lot of recording. Even if you have an amp in the room, the Helix native plugin is great for recording. You can manage a lot of the ambient reverb sounds from the Helix plugin. I've got a video on that on my channel already covering that kind of stuff, but here with basic Ampire, I want to show you how to get a good setting. Now, when you first turn on these amp simulators right here, the first thing you want to do is to get into software monitoring. So I don't want to hear this guitar sound anymore. I don't want to hear that DI. That's not going to help me, even though the timing is really good. I want to make sure that that is muted, and I want to enable software monitoring. So here in PreSonus Studio One, I can click this blue speaker icon, and as soon as I do, you're going to hear their default settings for Ampire. All right, as you can hear, that's way too loud. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna load up a different amp. I wanna start with something clean, and we'll get to the heavier stuff a little bit later. So they have a Blackface Twin emulation. Of course, we can basically assume that this is going after more of a Fender amp. So let's start off with just a clean amp setting. And a lot of these things are gonna apply whether you're using Vox, Marshall, or any sort of other amps. Okay, the yin and yang. We always need to be aware of that level we set when we were just checking our input on the audio interface. I don't want to lose that level going forward. Okay, so if I enable this Ampire plugin, if I strum that G chord, we can tell that level has gone up. We've gotten things a lot louder, and that can be deceiving. Whenever you're using these sort of amp plugins, we need to make sure that our output volume is not creeping up on us, because you turn on a pedal, that pedal's a lot louder. We think that louder sounds better. Well, you need to make sure that you're balancing the stuff. So on Ampire, there is an output volume knob here at the top right. I'm gonna take this and I'm just gonna turn it down. And what I wanna do is get on my output metering, I want to get more similar levels to when we didn't have the plugin on at all. Okay, so the way that I'm going to monitor it on PreSonus Studio One is I can look at these first two sets of bars, and this is the output coming from the amp, and I can see right next to it is our input signal, and I want to make sure those are as close as possible. If I bypass Ampire, turn it back on. So here we can hear that the tone has changed, but the overall volume is pretty consistent, and that's what we need to keep. So as we turn on pedals and things, if you need to adjust the output volume should have nothing to do, at least with Ampire, it should have nothing to do with the tone that we're getting. It just has that overall volume. So if I turn on a distortion pedal, things are getting too loud, I need to adjust that distortion pedal, or I can adjust the overall output volume. So output volume here on the top right, it'll be the same with the Helix plugin. Typically you'll see an input meter, you'll see an output meter. If you increase the input meter, you're probably gonna have to decrease the output. That's why I'm talking about that yin and yang. If my input is being cranked up, my output probably needs to go down. That has not a lot to do with tone, it's just making sure that I'm not clipping my signal, or I'm not feeding that desire for me to have louder and louder things. Okay, so here we have the Ampere setting, and I want to say this as a technical note. If you're recording the electric guitar straight into your audio interface and you're worried about latency, I can show you what latency is real quick. If I go back to console and I turn on my input monitoring and the Ampere at the same time, do you hear this slapback effect? You're hearing my guitar going in, and you're also hearing the software rendering coming back. This would be very difficult to record with. So in PreSonus Studio One, you can go into your song setup preferences and make sure you mess with your device block size. I've got mine set to 1024. And then when it comes to processing, I want this set to maximum. When you set it to maximum, you have what is available as this low latency monitoring. So over on the main fader, you'll see this Z, and as soon as I enable the Z, I am now in low latency mode. So now I can play guitar without hearing that doubling effect. I still want to make sure that my input is muted, but that is what's going to enable me to tweak these amp settings and hear them with as little latency as possible. So here we have the amp and we have a few pedals. None of the pedals are engaged at the moment, and this is highly recommended. If you're setting up your amp in the room, disable all of your pedals and get a good amp sound early on. Now, a good amp sound is going to be highly subjective, but at the moment, I'm plugged into this vibrato channel on this clean amp, and I'm in input 1. This bright switch is essentially going to make it a little bit brighter, okay? So that's with the bright switch off. If I turn the bright switch on, I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but especially with the Fender amps, when they have this bright cap or bright switch, what it's enabling you to do is to get a brighter sound at a lower volume. So typically we have to crank Fender amps to where they're really loud in the room. Well, at lower volumes, if you're struggling to have a brighter tone, make sure you turn on the bright switch. I like the bright switch on this Ampere plugin. Again, the plugin has nothing to do with a real life Fender. Yes, I do think a real life Fender will sound better than this Ampere, but I have to go with what the software is giving me. So across the board here, we've got several settings. We're going to come back to volume in just a second, but treble, middle, and bass. When it comes to your EQ settings, this is probably the most highly subjective portion of it. You may be needing a duller sound on your guitar. If you want something to be duller, you have a couple of options. You can either turn down treble. Right now, everything's pretty much at 6. If I turn down the treble knob to a 2, we now have this. If I turn the treble knob up to 9, really when it comes down to EQ, most of the time I'm keeping everything around the 5 or 6 region, okay? Most of my EQing is gonna come through when I'm mixing. I can use plugins like FabFilter Pro Q3. I don't really need to mess with this unless you're in a band context. Most of the time, if you're playing live and you really just need a little bit more mid-range, these are just shortcuts to help you get that. But most of the time, I'm gonna keep these things flat unless I've got issues. If it sounds like it's too bassy, I will turn down the bass. So when it comes to EQ, my recommendation to you is the EQ on your amp settings, look at them as cuts, okay? I don't want to be boosting treble on the amp as much as I want to be turning down bass and mids, okay? For me, I get a better result when I'm turning things down when it comes to EQ rather than turning things up. If you're turning down treble, mid, and bass all together, you probably just need to adjust the volume on your amp, okay? So I'm not gonna spend too much time on the EQ. If you're doing a guitar part and it's really high up on the neck, you can turn up the bass a lot because you're not hitting the lower strings and it's not as obvious. So that's going to be highly subjective when it comes to your settings. The reverb is going to depend on your amp and your taste. Again, most of the time the reverb on these Fender amps is pretty great. The reverb setting on this Ampire rendition of a Fender amp is not particularly my favorite, so I'm just gonna bypass it. I usually have that one at about 1. Reason being, they've got a spring reverb emulation on this, but I find that the spring has too much springiness. There's too much of this like slapping sound that happens. Again, that's gonna come down to taste with your amp. Typically with a real amp, you're going to be better off having just a smidge of reverb. Something on 2 or 3 is going to be great, but it also depends on what amp you're using. And then the vibrato, I'm not really going to be using it on this channel much at all. I'll set the intensity to something like 2 or 3 and the speed to 2 or 3 as well. It's not because I like playing with vibrato, but when you're using a digital rendition of something like a Fender amp, it helps to have a little bit of movement on the amp, okay? Okay, so now we want to talk about this volume knob. This is really where you're going to get most of your amp settings from. So this is going to depend on your specific setup. You may be using something like a Strymon Iridium. I personally have the UAD FX pedal, the Dream pedal, which is emulating a Fender Deluxe Reverb. Most of those pedals or software emulators are going to have some sort of input and output knob. The relationship between your input and output is going to determine a lot of how much grit or how much distortion you're getting on your amp. So right now I've got the volume set of about 6 on the vibrato channel, and here is what the amp sounds like. It's very, very clean, too clean in fact. So if I crank this volume knob all the way to 10, let's see what happens. Okay, now it sounds a lot more alive, but we also noticed that the output volume got too loud. So if I wanted to use the 10 setting on this volume knob, I need to bring my output knob down so that the relationship is a lot more intact. The tone of the amp should not be changing just from the output knob. It still sounds very saturated, but it's not as sterile as before. So for this particular instance of Ampire, even though I've got this thing on 10 and the output knob has been turned down, this is not distorting like a Deluxe Reverb. If you had a Deluxe Reverb or a Fender Twin, and you cranked it to 10, it would be heavily distorted. So that's going to come down to what emulator you're using. PreSonus Studio One have included this Tube Screamer pedal. You can also swap it out with something like a Rat if you'd like. Just go down here where it has the pedal's name and you can select whatever you want. We'll stick with the Tube Screamer for now. As soon as I enable the Tube Screamer, you're going to notice the gain or the volume is going crazy. Now, that might be preferable for you, but I can tell you that with the level knob all the way up on this Tube Screamer pedal, this needs to come down. So if I go, now that I've introduced the Tube Screamer pedal, what I'll typically do, I don't mind if there's a little bit of a volume boost with this pedal, but I don't want it to be too dramatic. So this is with the pedal off. Turn the pedal on. Okay, I don't mind that. The drive knob is all the way up. So this is, again, the drive, how much distortion you're using is going to be down to whatever song you're playing. Probably too much distortion for me. I'll back off the drive knob. Let's try the drive at about 45%. Now the tone sounds a little bit muddy. It's a little bit dark, so I'm gonna brighten this thing up quite a bit. Still heavily distorted. So you can play around with that. Of course, it's doing the Tube Screamer thing. It's giving me some more mid-range, but the important thing is checking that yin and yang. If I've got the pedal off and it sounds like this, I turn it on. I'm making sure that my output volume, this is the common problem that happens. The more pedals you introduce, they keep adding more and more volume, and then eventually you're clipping and you don't even realize you're clipping. So it's gonna depend on the software you're using. Ampire allows you to use, it's got 3 pedal emulations, and then here I can determine at what point my amp simulation is gonna be there. So I've got my Tube Screamer first, then it's going to my Fender amp emulation, and then it's going into what's next is this chorus pedal, but I'm gonna change this one out. I'm not too interested in the chorus today. Let me just go to a good reverb, okay? So here I've got a reverb pedal. So that sounds kind of like one of those bathroom reverbs, pretty small. So I'm gonna increase the size quite a bit. Okay, again, you can mess with this. It's gonna come down to your preferences. This reverb pedal doesn't have a length adjustment to it, so sounds like it's trying to emulate more of a room than anything that's gonna be particularly long, but you mess with the mix knob. So this might be more specific for trying to get more of like that amp reverb sound rather than doing an overly affected reverb. And of course, if I want to add some delay, I can put the delay in front of the reverb. Because it's with the DAW, I can have it synced to the specific tempo of the song. I can increase the feedback and such. So when it comes to reverbs, delays, again, this is probably the most, that's up to your preference, but the important part that's been established up to this point is that you need to make sure your input going into your audio interface, that you're getting a healthy signal from your guitar that is hopefully not extra noisy, or you might need to do some TLC on your guitar. Make sure you're getting a appropriate signal that's something around -18 to -12 on your meter. Then you can load whatever sort of amp plug-in simulator you want. Start with your amp settings. Make sure that you've got the volume knob of the amp set to an appropriate level of distortion. So if I go back to this, if I wanted my amp to be on channel 2 of the vibrato, and I've got the volume knob at 7, let's switch this thing out to, let's go with more of the Vox amp. So here's a Vox. Okay, we definitely need to boost some signal. So right now we're in the Brilliant channel input 2. Let's go to input 1. I need to increase the Brilliant channel's volume. Okay, I can increase the output. Okay, and then Vox, as always, they have the bass, cut, and treble. You can mess with this as well. And one feature that's new on this one is that if you want to link the channels together, you can double click where it has the vibrato tremolo channel, second input. You get a much saturated, more overdriven sound. You can mess with that as much as you want. Of course, if this is my distorted amp sound already, if I add the distortion, it's a little too much for me, so I'm gonna back off this drive quite a bit, but there's a relationship there that you can see. We've got the Tube Screamer pedal, it's adding distortion. If my amp is already distorted, then my distortion pedal might cause more mud for me than good, okay? So think about it this way. If you're using a distorted or overdriven amp, you may wanna lean towards using more of a boost pedal, something that's gonna boost the volume for you significantly, rather than just adding more hair, okay? Things get really clogged up and messy. If you keep adding distortion, you're gonna run out of headroom, and what ends up happening, you're playing on stage or you're playing within the context of a mix, and no one is able to hear what you're doing because it's so compressed and it's also so quiet in the mix. It's not gonna be able to stand a chance, okay? So obviously there's gonna be different settings out there. If you've got something like this Marshall, by nature, there's just a lot of noise because this is going to be an amp that's meant for more of a high gain situation. So I highly recommend if you're playing something like a Marshall or you're heavily distorting your amps, you may want to lean towards getting a guitar that has humbuckers rather than single coils. Not to say that you can't. Crazy distorted. Make sure you turn down the output knob. As you can hear, even on my guitar, when it's on the split position, I'm still getting a significant amount of hum. Again, the Marshall amps, I think they just take the humbuckers a lot cleaner. They're gonna be a lot more high gain, and that noise is usually acceptable, okay? So I hope that's helped you out. The main point of this video is make sure you've got the balance of your input and output knobs. If you're turning something up, if you're turning up the distortion on your distortion pedal, you need to go to either that distortion pedal's output knob and turn it down, or you need to go to your overall output knob on your software or your emulator and turn that down to compensate, okay? It's not to say you can't add gain along the way and that things can get louder, but the more you understand how one thing affects the other down the line, the better off you're going to be. When you're setting up your amp in the room or in some sort of storage room with a cabinet that's mic'd up, the same material applies. Make sure that you set your amp to be the gain and the amount of distortion that you're happy with, and then adjust the mic gain volume. So if you're using an SM57, you've got it stuck on the cabinet, adjust your SM57 so that it is not clipping on the way in, okay? If you put an SM57 in front of a big Marshall cabinet, you do not want that SM57 getting blown up on its way to your audio interface, so turn down the microphone gain volume so that it matches your amp settings, okay? You usually don't want to adjust your amp just for the microphone's sake. A lot of microphones have pads, they have ways of dealing with loud volume levels. If you're doing that, you're gonna end up cleaning up your amp when you don't want to. So I hope this video has been helpful in getting you started. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments section. I'll try to get to as many as possible. If you're interested in PreSonus Studio One, again, the Ampere version, you're gonna get the full feature loaded version of it with the version Professional. This is Studio One 6 Professional version. Or if you're on the subscription plan for Studio One, you can have access to this as well. Again, if you haven't tried the Helix native plugin that runs a little bit more expensive than Studio One Professional, but you're gonna get a lot more versatility out of the Helix than Ampere. My name's Chris Green, hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.